We have a very, very special sicha this morning on Parshas Truma from Chelek Lamed Aleph. Seif Aleph. Echad mehadvarim shenestavu Yisrael lahavi letrumas hamishkan. One of the things that Klal Yisrael were commanded to bring as donations or offerings to the Mishkan, as it says, "V'zois hatruma shetikhu me'itam." These are the offerings that you should take from among them. Hu eires techashim are the hides of something called techashim. Uperish Rashi, and on the word techashim, Rashi writes min chaya. It's a form of animal. Vihine berazal matzinu plukta bidavar. We find a a a difference of opinion. We find an argument as to what exactly is this unknown commodity called tchashim. Bavli huvu divrei Reb Shimon ben Lakish b'shem Reb Meir. In the Talmud Bavli, we have the words of Reb Shimon ben Lakish, Reish Lakish, in the name of Reb Meir, that who teaches that tachash shahaya b'mei Moshe, that this species known as tachash, which exists in the time of Moshe, bria b'fnei atzmai. It's a creation that is distinctive. Haya bria b'fnei atzmai haya. It was some kind of distinctive creation. V'lo yichriu b'chachamim imin chayahu imin behemahu. And the Chachamim did not come to a final decision if this was a creation that belonged in the category of wild animals or belonged in the category of domesticated animals. Aval bir Shalmi Isa, but in the Shalmi it says, Rabbanan Amrin bin Chayet Ahera. The rabbi said it was a kosher wild animal. V'chein Isa b'Tanchuma, and likewise it says in the Medrash Tanchuma, Rabbi Huda Eimer, Chaya Tahira Gidayla Haisa Bamidbar. This was a kosher, wild, very large animal in the desert. Uba'ira Shisha Givanim, and the hide of this animal had 6 different colors or 6 different shades. V'natlu Isa v'asu mimenu Urias. And they took this hide
Help me.
and they made a covering.
Just come here a second. Why is everything up?
Indeed. Thank you. And if you that they took this hide and they made from it urias, some kind of tapestry. And so based on this, and this is what Mefarshim explain, so based on this, it would seem that what Rashi is trying to do is weigh in on this conflicting opinions, this controversy, or this argument that swirls about this particular creation, if it's a wild animal or if it's a domestic animal. V'tzarech inyan, iyun. And we have to really understand this, the Rebbe said. Minayin le Rashi b'pshuta shel mikra. From where does Rashi get it, and why does Rashi feel that in Pshuta Shel Mikra it's so important for him to weigh in lachriya to determine bein deis elu shehum min chaya? What is it that Rashi feels compelled to weigh in on this and to say it was a wild animal? By the way, I don't know if this works for anybody else, but here with my students, they just love to hear the description of the tachash, and in some places it describes the tachash as having one horn in the middle of its forehead, which would make it a unicorn. No surprise, the Jews had it first. But if you're not on a college campus, it might not be that exciting for your demographic. Okay, we go on. Seif Beis. Achar kach mamshich Rashi. After this first comment on the word chashim, Rashi continues and he says, "V'lo haisa ela l'sha'a." And this creation, this animal, existed only temporarily. V'harbei gevanim hayula, and it had many colors or shades. L'kach mitargim, therefore the Targum defines the tachash as sazgoina, put a comma there. What is sazgoina? Shesas umispare bigvanin shaloi. That the reason why it's called sazgoina is because it takes joy and pride in its colors or in its shades. Okay. Bihine. Hatam shehutzach Rashi loymar shaloi heisa ela l'shah yesh loymar b'pashtos. The reason that Rashi has to tell us that this existed only temporarily is easily understood. Decheban shelo yadua l'loymid hamikra ben chamish l'mikra sheyesh min chaya sheshma tachash. Because ben chamish l'mikra never met this particular species. They never heard of an animal called a tachash. They go to the zoo on Chalamayid and they never saw a tachash. Mefarish Rashi, she'achein ein zu chayidua. So Rashi is validating and acknowledging that yes, don't worry that you never saw a tachash. It's not a very well-known animal. In fact, it's not known at all. Ki loy haisa ela l'shah, because it only existed temporarily, and therefore you don't know about it. In the brackets, Val pizeh move on gamatam shenokat Rashi loy haisa ela l'shah. And based on this, we understand why Rashi felt compelled to cite the words, and this only existed temporarily. Shazeu al derech lashon Bavli. This is importing, it seems, that Rashi is citing words from the Bavli, or citing the idea from the Bavli, that this was prepared or made available to Moshe temporarily, and he made from it what he needed for the Mishkan, benignas, and then it was hidden away. V'loika Yerushalmi, and not like the Yerushalmi, which says Kimin Chaya Tahira, Bara Hakadosh Baruch Hu, that this is a kosher wild animal that Hashem created LeMoshe b'Midbar, for Moshe in the Midbar, Kevan she'asa ba melachas HaMishkan nigniza, and as soon as the work of the Mishkan was completed, it was hidden away. Somewhere in one of the footnotes, it brings down from one of the Nevi'im, maybe we'll bump into it later, that there was a certain time where all the Jews wore shoes made out of tachash hide. And there's another footnote that says that it seems like there were two types of tachash. One was distinctive from which was made this tapestry, which was the uppermost kind of ceiling or roof, not ceiling, roof for the Mishkan, because you know that there were three layers, and the uppermost one, the third, the top one, was made out of tachash hide. And then there was another kind of tachash from which was made shoes for the rest of Klal Yisrael that seems that it existed for a longer amount of time. I don't see it on this page, so maybe it's on a forthcoming page. Okay. So it seems like Rashi is citing from the Bavli and not the Yerushalmi, or Kiloshan Reb Nechemia B'Tanchuma, or from Reb Nechemia's commentary, the Midrash Tanchuma, which says Ma'isa Nisim Hisa, that this was a miraculous instance, Olasha Shanivrsa Bay B'Sha Nigniza, and it was it was created for a very short time, and then right away it was hidden away. Rashi doesn't cite those two. Because al pipshuta shel mikra, Rashi doesn't have to go into the detail that this was a very special kind of creation, that it was miraculous, or b'chein ma'aseh miyuchad shel gnizas atachash. He also doesn't mention that it was hidden away. Elarak sheloi ha'isa ela l'shah v'lachein nishkach zichrei b'tanach. But rather only that it was only for a very temporary amount of time, and therefore its name is not mentioned again in Tanakh, and that's probably where the footnote is. Yeah, footnote 9 does bring down from the Yecheskel, and it does mention Tachash, and there's a Shakel Bataria, there's a whole back and forth about the origin of that tachash that gave rise to the shoes that were made for Klal Yisrael, but we can't go into that now. And it's also understood why Rashi continues and says that this particular creature had many stripes, many colors, many shades. Because this is not a very well-known creature, because it only existed for a short amount of time, Rashi has to explain what was distinctive, what was special about the hide of the Tchashim. There has to be some special characteristic of the Iris Tchashim. Otherwise, Hashem wouldn't have singled out these hides to bring to the Mishkan, because as we know, there weren't that many materials that were singled out, 13, or according to another opinion, 15. But that's not so many from the hundreds of thousands that exist in this world. There has to be something special. And especially because it doesn't say, like it says previously about the ram's hides, that they had to be dyed red. But about the tchashim, it doesn't say that they had to be dyed. V'lachein perish Rashi sheharbe gvanim hayu la ve'ein zukukim l'tzvia. And therefore we understand why Rashi has to say that this is a very colorful kind of hide, because then we understand that it doesn't need dyeing. Aval tzarich iyun mahi arichos lashon Rashi lekach mitargim sasgoina shesas umispar bigvanin shalai. So what the Rebbe has done is explain why Rashi feels compelled to bring down everything that he does. But what still remains a mystery is, why does Rashi have to cite from the Targum what the Targum says to Chashem is, which is Sasgoina, and then tell us, like, kind of unpack what Sasgoina means. Dilach seemingly, seemingly would have been enough to write this in short fashion, either kitar gumai, Rashi does this very often, that you should understand this word like the Targum defines it, or he could have said kitar gumai sazgoina, and bring down what the Targum says. Shemizem muchach sheyesh l'tachash harbe gvanin. From this would be understood that the tachash has a lot of shades. Umahi hadgashas Rashi. What is Rashi trying to teach by underscoring? And the Rebbe is going to ask two questions. One, he doesn't say kitargumai, he says lekach mitargim. Therefore, the Targum defines it as, and that would have been enough. And then you could go look up what the Targum says. But no, siyumai befirish divrei Targum, bepirish divrei Targum. Then he concludes with actually unpacking what the Targum says. On the Targum gives the word sasgoina, and Rashi says shasas umispar bigvanin shalai. Why? Again, why couldn't he have just said kitargumai? That's all. And then you go look it up in the Targum. Rashi does that. Also, why this distinctive word likach mitargim? That's why Targum has to define it as sasgoina. And why then unpack the word sasgoina? V'hine l'chayra divrei Rashi perush Targum mikarim b'gemara. Seemingly, what Rashi says on what the Targum says, which is sasgoina, is from the wording of the Gemara. Sha'Gemara mifareshes divrei Rabbi Nechemia. The Gemara explains or expounds on the words of Rabbi Nechemia. Shemichsa echad, that one covering, shall iris elim me'adamim va'iris chashim, that this covering was comprised of hides from rams that were dyed red and hides from techashim. Haya, this third covering was comprised of both of these hides. V'doime kemintla ilan, and the colorful hide is similar to a species known as tla ilan. It's some kind of species that hangs from trees. Shehachikama kemin tla ilan hu, sheyesh by gavnin harbe, v'loy tla ilan. So it looks like a tla ilan, which also has a lot of colors, but it's not. De'ilu hasam tame, because the tla ilan is tame, it's not a kosher animal, v'hacha tahar, and the tachash is a kosher animal. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yosef, hachi, this is why, hainu de mitargiminan sasgoina, this is why the Targum says that is sasgoina, shashesh shashas bigvanin harbe, that it rejoices in its many colors. Vizehu kiloshan Rashi, and this is similar to what Rashi says. Rabbi Yosef says, "Ihachi," this is why, and Rashi says, "Lekach mitargim," this is why. The Targum says, "Sasgoina." Shesas umispar bigvanin shalai, because it takes joy and pride in its colors or its shades or its stripes. Avol kvar nizbar kama pa'amim, but the Rebbe says we already explained many times. She'ein darkei shel Rashi b'peirush alater lahatik l'shonis Chazal, that Rashi is not in the business of simply citing the teachings of Chazal and their exact expressions, ki'im, but rather rak hanageya leperish shel mikra. He only imports into his parish what is Nageya, what is relevant to the Pshat. Uma Nageya Arichas Lashon HaGemara. What is Nageya? Why is it relevant in such elongated fashion to explain the word Tachash?
Sorry, are you
And
able to summarize the previous paragraph quickly? Because I'm a little bit lost.
okay, so let's do that. So first, the Rebbe kind of cleared the field by process of elimination, explaining all the parts of Rashi that are absolutely integral to understanding this, right? So he wants to explain to the Ben Chamish Mikra, who never heard of Tachash, what a Tachash is. So he has to say that it was only temporary. He also, the Rebbe says, has to explain that it's very colorful, because that will explain why the pasuk doesn't say that we have to dye it. However, we're still seemingly left with all these extra words that still don't seem necessary yet. The Rebbe still has to explain how these are necessary to Mechamash Mikra to understand the term tachash. So then he says, he's deepening the question by saying, seemingly, it would have been enough for Rashi to do what he very often does, which is to say, Kitar Gumai. You want to know more about this word? Go look in Targum Onkelos. Targum Onkelos defines it for you. But not only does Rashi not do that, but he does something distinctive. First of all, he says, Lechach mitargim. This is why Targum has to say. Then he also brings down afterwards, what does it mean? On the word sasgaina, Rashi brings down shasas umispar bigvanin shalai, that this is a species that takes joy and pride in its stripes and colors. Now, seemingly, at first blush, it seems that Rashi is simply importing from the Gemara. The Gemara explains the words of Reb Nechemia, that there was one of the three coverings on the Mishkan was made out of animal hide, and it was some kind of fusion or combination of the red dyed ram hides and the hides of a species known as techashim. And over there in the Gemara it says that this hide from the tachash was similar to the hide of an animal known as tla ilan. It hangs from trees. Maybe it was some kind of a monkey or something like that hangs from trees. And the difference, and it has a lot of stripes, it has a lot of colors, a lot of shades. The difference is that the tla ilan is not a kosher species and the tachash is. And then the Gemara goes on to say that Rabbi Yosef said, this is why the Targum has to say, sazgoina, that it is a animal that is joyous and is proud, is joyous, sorry, about its many colors. And this, the Rebbe says, is similar to what Rashi is saying, lekach mitargum sazgoina. Does that help, Hani? A little bit? Could see on your face just a little bit. Okay. So you could see already that the Rebbe is going to bring our attention to the fact that Rashi added another word to what the Gemara says. The Gemara says that this species is joyous concerning its many colors, and Rashi also put in is proud. But before the Rebbe talks about that, the Rebbe says, okay, at first blush, it looks like Rashi is simply giving us maybe a synopsized version of this discussion in the Gemara. But that's not Rashi's way. Rashi's not in the business of just importing opinions to the Gemara in wholesale fashion. Now, let's look in, you know what? Maybe not. Let's skip this bracket for now, and let's go to Yesh Mefarshim. Let's go to the next paragraph. There are commentaries that say Sherashi ba l'taritz divrei Targum. That why does Rashi have to come and unpack the words of Targum? Dekevan shekasav Rashi v'lo haisa ela l'shah, because Rashi wrote that this only existed temporarily. So ech nemar b'targum b'bavel shem l'chayazu sh'lo haisa yedua loy lifnei zman hamishkan v'loy la'achrav. There are mefarshim that say, I'll tell you why Rashi feels compelled to continue to explain what Targum says. Because if Rashi told us this animal only existed during the time of Moshe, so how did they know about this? How did uncles know about this in Bavel? V'lachein kasav Rashi lekach mitargim sasgoina shesas umispara bigvanin shaloi. She'ein kavanas hatargum shezehu shem tachash ba'aramis. Rashi wants to explain that Targum is not coming to tell us that tachash is called sasgoina in Aramaic, elazehu tir mar'eu shalatachash, but rather that sasgoina is a description of what this species looks like. Shesas bigvanin shalai. In other words, that the word sasgoina is a term that encapsulates what this animal looks like, and Rashi just unpacks what that word means. It's kind of like shorthand. It's like code, and Rashi gives you what it means. Okay, but why does Rashi feel compelled to say this? Because the Mechamish Mikra is going to, if Rashi is going to send them to Targum, they're going to see Saskaina, they're going to be like, wait, how did they know what this was? Aval gam perized dachaku. But the Rebbe says, but this is also very difficult, this explanation. Sharei kimidubar kama pa'amim, as said many times, ein inyanai shall perish Rashi ala Torah lahatik ulefarish as divrei Targum. It's not Rashi's way to cite and certainly not to explain Targum. Targum is Targum, Rashi is Rashi. Sometimes Rashi will tell you kitargumai, that you should go check out what Targum is telling you how to define a word. But generally speaking, he's not a super commentary on the commentary Targum. So what exactly does Rashi want to teach us here? Gimel. We might say that the explanation in this, simply speaking, is Rashi beperushai min chaya loy ba lishlal haperish atachashu min behema. First, you have to understand what Rashi did in the above-mentioned commentary on his first Dibur HaMaschil. Earlier, Rashi on the word tachash said min chaya. And you might remember that the Rebbe says that it seems like what Rashi is doing is weighing in on the argument in the Gemara in the two Gemaras between the Babli and the Yerushalmi if this is a chaya or this is a behema. But the Rebbe says, no, actually, that's not what Rashi is coming to do. He's not coming to say it's not a behema, it's a chaya. No, that's not his intention. Ela lishlol kasal kidaitach shetachash hushem tseva. But rather, he wants to disabuse you of thinking that the word tachash is a kind of color. Because we had Oires Elim Adamim. Earlier, the pasuk said hides of rams that were dyed dyed red. So you might think that this is a different type of hide that's getting dyed tachash color. And this is what Rashi wants to obviate. He wants to tell you, no, it's not the color of a dye. It's a type of an animal. Because you might have thought it's a tseva, it's a color. Perish iris chashim, hukamai iris elim adamim. You're going to think it's the same thing. Dikashem she'iris elim adamim perish iris elim shetzvois hayu adam la'achar avudan. Just like earlier when the pasuk tells you iris elim adamim, what does it mean? It means that you take hides of rams, and after you go through the process of turning them into hide, there's the lengthy process, then you dye them red. That they took hides and they dyed it with a color called tachash. And this would be like what is taught in the Yerushalmi. That there are a few opinions. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Teinin l'shem shetzavu nikra, that they were actually rams. They were called tachash because of the dye that they were colored with. Oiris elim tzuis hayu, oiris tachashim v'nikram tchashim al shem tzeva shedaima l'tchashim. That they were actually hides of rams, and they were called tchashim because of the color of the dye that looks like tchashim. Reb Nechemya Omer, Glaktinin. And Reb Nechemya differs, and he says, no, it's another color called glaktinin, and I could not find a definition of the color glaktinin. It's some type of color. If anybody can help me and knows what this might look like or what it's similar to, I was not able to find that. But in the Yerushalmi, there's two different opinions about what color, and actually they both agree that it's actually hide of rams. The difference is it a color like tachash or is it a color of glaktinin? V'lachein kasav Rashi d'tchashim min chaya. This is Rashi's intention to tell you that tachash is not the color of a dye. It's a kind of animal. The kavanasai b'pashtos, and what he tends to teach us is simple. Shalakhu iris shal min chaya sheshma tachash, that they took hides, they took the skins of an animal called tachash, v'loi shalakhu iris elim v'tzavu oisam b'tzeva tachash, and not that they took hides of rams and they dyed it with a color called tachash. And what's Rashi's proof? Simply speaking, it is that because if truly the Torah would want to tell us that they dyed tachash, they dyed ram skins with a color tachash, the pasuk should have said oires elim me'adamim utchashim. The pasuk should have said hides of rams dyed red and dyed tachash color. Okay, or something like that. V'loi ve'oires chashim. It shouldn't have said oires me'adamim and then oires tachashim. Hide.
Okay. Wouldn't anybody reading it understand that? Because it's elim, madamim, and then it says just oires tachashim. So here it doesn't say. Like what this paragraph is saying is what I think anybody that would be reading it, even a Ben Chamish Mikra, would understand by themselves.
Well, Raki, look back to the first paragraph in this seif, and you see that there are 2 days in the Yerushalmi. So it seems
Well, in a different place that they ended up calling.
no. On this pasuk, which you're saying is so simple, there's a plukta in the Yerushalmi between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemiah.
Oh, okay.
And
Thank you.
both of them agree that it's ram's hide. What they don't agree is on what color it was dyed. So it seems that it's not so simple to understand. And
Sorry.
but the Rebbe is saying that if you want to know what Rashi's proof is, like you're saying, it's from the pasuk. It's from the pasuk because the pasuk didn't have to say v'oire, say another time hides tchashim. From this, it's move on, it's understood. She'ein elu ha'ir shalem medubar lefnei, that these are different types of hides. They're not the hides that were referred to earlier when you say iris elim. Elo she'im iris shel tachash, v'tachash hu min chaya. But rather that they're hides from tachash, and tachash is a kind of animal. V'zeu gam ha'hemshech b'divrei Rashi. And now once we understand that what Rashi's coming to say is not to weigh in on what type of animal it is, if it's a chaya or behema, but to weigh in on the fact that it's an animal altogether and it's not a color of dye. Now we can better understand, because we have the framework, what the rest of Rashi is trying to tell us, which is lekach metargim sasgoina. Therefore, the Targum defines this as a sasgoina. What is a sasgoina? A type of animal shesas umispor bigvan shaloi, that is joyous and takes pride in its stripes and colors. V'zeh ba Rashi lahavi raya mehatargum she'enai stam shem tzeva, right? Because Targum precedes Rashi, so Rashi is by pulling on the Targum, not just telling somebody go look Targumai, but actually importing from the Targum. Rashi is bringing a proof that it's not stam, a color of dye. Shetzavu by ha'eres, that tachash is not a color of dye with which hides were colored, ella shuhu min chaya. That is actually a kind of animal. The tachash meturgam sasgaina, like the Targum says, that a tachash is a sasgaina. And what is this sasgaina? Shahachaya sas umispar bigvanin shaloi. This is a kind of animal that takes joy and pride in its color and stripes. And that's why Rashi didn't do what he does in other places, and in a very succinct fashion, just say, as explained by the Targum, Ki oz haya makam lefarish kavanas hatargum haya shetachash hutzeva hamurkav mitzirav harbe gvanin. Then you might have been able to again make this mistaken assumption that what the Targum is saying is that sasgoina is a color, that tachash is a color that is comprised of multiple colors. Or you might have thought that the word sasgoina is a contraction, perushai shisha gvanim. Sas is shisha, because the samach and the sin can be interchangeable. It's 6 colored. Al derach hadeh b'tanchuma sheba'ar tachash yesh shisha gvanin. Like the Tanchuma tells us that it was an animal that had 6 colors. So Rashi again wants to disabuse you of thinking that this is a dye, a multicolored dye. So he's madgish, he underscores, this is not a dye. This is talking about a living animal. How do you know it's a living animal? Because it takes joy, sas, umispa'er, and takes pride, bigvan shalai. Shali dizeh, move on, shekavanas hatargum lemin chaya. And through this, it becomes abundantly clear that what the Targum is referring to is a type of animal and not a color of dye. A color of dye can't be proud of its many colors and can't take joy. Has to be something living. Dalit. אבל עדיין צריך עניין קל, עיון קל, or עיון קצר, in the diuk Lashon Rashi shesos umispar bigvanin shalai. But we still have to drill down, we still have to explain a little bit more on this detail in Rashi's terminology that this is a species that takes joy and pride. Seemingly, if Rashi's point is to tell us that this is not a type of dye, but it's a type of animal, we can get the memo if Rashi writes, like the Gemara wrote, that this animal is happy with its colors. What compels Rashi to add this additional description that this is an animal that takes pride in its colors? V'yesh leimar, we might say, shebazeh merames Rashi gam lahamayla hamiyuchedes sheba'eres tchashim. That with this, Rashi wants to allude to another great and distinctive advantage in these particular hides, in the Eires of Tchashim. She'ena rak biglal yofi hagvanim sheba'eres elu. That the reason why this was one of very few materials that Hashem asked should be donated to the building of the Mishkan is because it's not just that these hides are extraordinarily beautiful, but that the colors of the hide actually underscore the characteristic of this particular animal. That this particular hide that this animal had, comprised of all these different colors, this multicolored hide, caused the tachash to be proud of its colors. And this is something not only distinctive, but something central to the construal of this animal, so much so that it makes its way into the name of this animal in Aramaic. And now we're in a position to understand the great advantage and the importance of this particular offering or donation. A tip is asking, is the Tachash's pride metaphorical? No, it seems that it's literal. It seems that it's literal. So it's moving a pashut. Shetruma memin chai, oile b'chashivusa al truma min hatzameach. So generally speaking, we understand that a offering or donation from the category of living creatures is a more important or prestigious type of offering than something that comes from the category of vegetation. And we see this with offerings on the Mizbeach, right? That there were cheaper types of offerings, a meal offering, a flour and oil, etc. But then if you bring a bird, that's considered a more prestigious offering. If you bring an animal, that's considered yet a more prestigious offering. Okay, so this is the beginning of the Rebbe taking us way, way deep into this idea of an animal that has colorful skin and takes pride in it, because he has essentially answered all the questions he had on Rashi. He asked questions, he resolved them, but the sicha is just beginning in terms of the Chassidus and the Hira to us. So he begins by saying that here we see what the advantage of this particular offering was, Iris Tchashim, over even the hide that came from rams that was dyed red. Not only because this animal is multicolored, Not like other things that were colored, that were dyed in the Mishkan, but they were one color. They were red, they were purple, they were blue. But that's not the main thing. But what makes this offering distinctive is that it's hide, whose colors, multicolors, are natural and inherent and endemic to the animal itself. דמנידבס אוירס אלימדם שצבו אויסן לאחרי שכבר היו, הרי הנדבה ממין החי, היא רק מנהיגה לגוף האור עצמי. Because in the donation that came from the dyed ram's hide that were colored only after the hide was in existence, so the offering, the part of the offering is from the category of living, but the color, that's from the world of vegetation, right? These were natural dyes. They were not synthetic dyes. They came from certain properties of vegetation in this world. But in contradistinction, the hide of the tachash, even the color came from the category of chai. Because the colors are essential to the animal. And it's not just an essential feature of the hide. It's not just natural colors, but it's actually an essential feature of the characteristics of this animal, which are shesas umispar bigvanin shaloi kenal. As we said above, this is an animal that takes joy and pride in its colors. V'yesh leimer, we might say, shezeu tam noisav l'kach sheyirias ele hayu hamichse ha'elyon b'yoseh sh'ala mishkan. And we might say that this is one reason, and brace yourself, because this is only one reason. There's a much, much deeper reason that the Rebbe is going to unfurl soon. But we might say that this is the reason why this was the uppermost covering on the Mishkan. Underneath this, there was a covering made out of the hair of goats. And underneath that, there was a covering made out of wool with multicolors and multi forms that matched the other two urias, the one that served as the separating wall, let's say, between the Ayel Mayit and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and the one that served as the door into the Ayel Mayit. Because on top of it, in addition to the fact that this urea, this covering, was much more beautiful than the others. And you can't compare a tapestry of one color to a tapestry of multicolors, and especially one that is natural to it. But on top of all of this, the multicoloredness, I know that's not a word, of the hide was essential to the characteristic of the animal. Okay, so now we might understand why this was the uppermost covering, the one that was visible to the eye. Hey. Okay, here we're going to start diving into depth. V'yesh lahaisiv bir bazeh. And we might add another explanation to this, that it was particularly this covering made out of the hides of Tchashim that was the uppermost covering of the Mishkan. Because this unique advantage of the hides of Tchashim, that the colors are natural yesh boi bitui miyuchad shel hatoichen hapnimi dechlalos hamishkan. This hide was a unique expression. It showcased in unparalleled fashion what the innermost idea is of the Mishkan. And the Rebbe is going to say, what is the essential idea of the Mishkan? Chaya, or Chai, who remes al Kadosh Baruch Hu. It alludes to Hashem, Shenikra Chai Ha'elamim, the everlasting, vivifying force of all the worlds. Lefi Shehu Yisbarach Makar HaChayim Shel Kol Ha'elamais. Hashem is the source of all the worlds. Ubelashon HaRambam, and in the words of the Rambam, Kol Hanimtzoim Mishamayim V'Oretz U'ma Shebeinehem. Everything that exists in heaven and on earth, and between heaven and earth, Lo Nimtzu, only exist me'amitas himatzoi. They exist only from the truth of Hashem's existence. Umistaber, and it's plausible. She'ein kavanas harambam mashakasav shekol hanimtzam lanimtzu elam amitas himatzoi rak lechol hanimtzam bichlalo shelahem. It's plausible to understand the words of Rambam that he's not just referring to all of these various existences. Elagam biprate hanimtza shekol prate hanimtza lo nimtzu elam amitas himatzoi. That in saying that everything only exists as an extension of, or as a result of, or due to the truth of existence, which is Hashem, that he is talking not only about things in the most general form, but in all of their particularities, in all of their details. Kiloimar, this is to say, Kol davar sheba'olam nechlak bechlalos l'shleisha chalakim. Everything that exists can generally speaking, be divided into three categories. Aleph, etzem metzias hadavar, shezeu inin hashava b'chol davar. The first is the fact that it exists, and that is in equal measure to every aspect of existence. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the stone or you're talking about the sun. It exists. That's Aleph. Beis, tchunasei hamiyuchedes shel kol davar. Then there's the unique characteristics of each thing. Shebazeh kol davar chalak mizulasei. And in this, everything is different from everything else. Ukamay eish umayim hachalukim b'tiva mitchunasam. Like take water and fire. They're completely different. Ad shetiva shel eish hu hefach tiva shel mayim. Not only are they different, they're diametrically opposing existences. And then there's the third aspect, shar prote kol davar, the details, she'enam chelek me'etzem tchunasei v'tchunai, that are superficial, that are external, that are not part of its essence. Okay? So we have existence, that's equal to all of existence. We have the distinctiveness, and then we have the particularities, the details. V'chol inyane hanivra hanal lo'nimtzu ela me'amitas himatzai. And all three categories of each existence all devolve or all exist from the true existence, Hashem, Dahainu. Noisaf al etzem metzius hanivra, val derech zeh toichnei b'gidra miyuchad shel kol nivra, gam haprotim hatafelim nimtzu me'amitas himatzai. On top of the fact that there is existence, qua existence, generally speaking, and there are different categories of existence, also the details, hatfelim, which means seemingly unimportant, they all are derived from the truth of all existence. And once you understand this, the Rebbe says, now you can understand the profundity and the importance of the covering on top of the Mishkan that came from the Eretz Chashim. Because what is the central theme? What is the inyan v'teichen? What is the concept of Mishkan? V'shachanti b'seicham, that I should be able to rest amongst you. Hashras hashchina ba'oifin goloi. Hashem is always resting amongst us. What is the novelty of the Mishkan? That it's in revealed fashion. Hashras hashchina ba'oifin goloi. Hare move on, so it's understood. Sheboi haya ba'oifin goloi zeh. Sheme'amitas hi matzai shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu nimtzu kol hanimtzoim b'chol prateim. What was revealed? That even the details of everything and all of its multifariousness, that too comes from Hashem. Ukemivor bisfarim, and like it's written in Rabbeinu Bechaya and other Sfarim, shahatziyurim hagufonim, that the material designs in the Mishkan and in the Kalim of the Mishkan, when from those, efshar lehizboinin mehem tiyurim helyonim dugma lahem. If you meditate and you contemplate on the material designs of the Mishkan and its Kalim, you can come to understand the celestial forms that give rise to the material forms. So if you look at the physical form of what was in the Mishkan and you contemplate it, you could begin to understand its antecedent in in the heavens, in celestial form. And this is because the physical form devolves from the spiritual form, the Ukafi Sheherech Harama B'Sifra Teiras Ha'ila, and like this is explained in elongated fashion by the Rama in his Sefer Teiras Ha'ila. V'lachein hayatzarech liyas b'mishkan inyan hamayr ala kesher shebein dvarim chitzoniyim shel hanivroim im amitas himatzai, and that's why there had to be something in the Mishkan that showcased and taught about this bond between externalities of creation and their source in the true one existence. And this is alluded to in the hides of the Tchashim. That in the Tachash, even the colors of its hide, which this is just an external superficial thing, hu min hachaya, but the color itself comes from the category of living. Lahayris to teach shagam advar machi chitzonim shel hanivroim ad letzeva shelahem lo nimtzu ella me'amitas himatzai chai ha'elamim. The color of the hide comes from the category of chai, like the Rebbe said earlier, and this alludes to the fact that even externalities like the color of the hide come from the chai olamim, the amitas himatzai, the one true existence, the eternal vivifying force of all worlds. Okay, now you might maybe want to take a sip of your coffee for Se'iv Vav. Okay.
Rivky, I don't really understand the difference between the second and the third. Give a practical example, please.
Okay. The practical example is the first category is that it exists. Okay. The second category would be that it belongs to the animal kingdom. The third category would be that it's a kangaroo and it has a pocket in front where it could put its children. Or that it's from the animal kingdom and it's a tachash and it has 6 colors or it has multicolors, etc. So those are the 3. Okay, Vav.
Could you explain why it had to be the multicolors that would express this? Like, why couldn't it be any other aspect of any animal that expresses this? I don't really understand why it had to be. Is it because it's so obvious when you have multicolors, or like why can't you say it's because even the very hairs of a ram within that is also the essence of Hashem?
I think it's because of what you said the first. that when an animal has that many colors, it's that distinctive, it's that eye-catching, it's that distinguishable. So that becomes kind of like exhibit A, right? But what the Rebbe is pointing out is that you might say, oh, I'm attracted to this animal. This animal is more fun than another animal because look at all of its colors. But you're going to say to yourself, okay, that's an external aspect of the animal. The Rebbe says, no, it's coming to teach you that even the externalities are an aspect of the amitas himatzai, of the true existence.
Isn't it that he's excited about his colors? And I don't think a regular just animal that just has whatever he hears is excited about it.
Then we have, correct, thank you, Elisha, but then we have that additional thing that the Rebbe is fetching at the end of Seif Hey, which is that the color themselves come from the category of Chai. This alludes to Chai Elamim, which is another word for Mitas Himatzai.
I keep on thinking about a peacock because I feel like it's like so like that's its I don't know, that's the example I keep on envisioning in my head.
Yeah,
I know it's not something that exists now, but it just feels like it's whole
I'm not getting
existence.
into somebody else just wrote peacock strut their feathers. So I'm not getting into Hashem's head why she chose Tachash over peacock, but maybe it's easier to make a covering for the Mishkan out of one piece of hide than having to put together all those peacock feathers.
Right. Well, we don't know what the
that
Tachash
the
look
women
like.
are very, very skilled, but maybe they also have
Tachash was kosher. I don't know that a peacock is kosher.
Right. And also, we don't know what the Tachash looked like. It could have been more exciting than the peacock.
There is a day that the tachash was not kosher and it was used anyway. But this is what it was.
If I may just ask, like you have the different levels, and you distinguish the third level as being its specific kind, like kangaroo. But I'm understanding that
No, not even specific species. Let's say you could say that that's still in the second. Okay, you could say that the second category is that it's an animal and it's not an inanimate object. Okay, or you could even say which animal it is. But then you have the specificities within the animal.
Right. Because when you said it before, I understood the third category was that it's a kangaroo. That was the one that you used. And I'm understanding it that it's actually specific because its colors define its quality. And that's like a much more defined than just a general kangaroo.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Like the pocket in the front of the kangaroo to carry its children.
Yes.
Vav. V'yesh lahesif was there. And we might add to this. Al pi bir Rabbeinu Hazakim b'Torah Or. And the Rebbe is bringing here from a mimer of the Alter Rebbe in Torah Or. But the Alter Rebbe explains. Now, I was just about to preface that I am not feeling 100% confident that I understand this seif. I did listen to multiple Magidei Shiurim. Each one had a little bit of a different way of explaining it. And one said he has to read this again and study this again. So I certainly am not professing clarity. I'm going to try to do my best based on what I was able to gather. So the Alter Rebbe explains Al derech hahefresh bein chomer hanivra v'tzurasei. The Alter Rebbe explains the difference between matter and form. Sha'chomer shel hanivroim nivra bidvar Hashem ubasara ma'amores. Matter was created through Hashem's speech, through the 10 utterances, the 10 fiats. Mashe enkein oifen tzuras harakia ledugma. But in contradistinction, the form, for instance, what form heaven would take. Nase b'chefes Hashem. This was done through Hashem's desire. Shaloi ba lichlal gilui b'dibor amaymor. It was the desire of Hashem, which did not come to revealed expression through speech or utterance. Shahatam lazeh. What's the reason for this? Hulefisha dibor omaymor hu hapayel hayeshus shebechol hanivraim. Because speech, utterance, is what gives rise to that feeling of existence, otherwise known as ego, that all created things have. This is to say that because speech is at a remove from essence, in that remove, in that distance between essence and the thing, there is rise to that feeling of separateness, otherwise known as ego. But the form, that's true of matter, but the form comes from desire, which is a transcendent aspect that never left from its source. There is no distance. And so there's an inherent connection between the form and the essence of Hashem. Now, why did Hashem have to create everything else through speech? Because if all of creation would only have happened in similar fashion through Hashem's desire, then the world would be by definition abnegated and completely effaced within Hashem. It would have been subsumed in its source because there would have been no distance. So in contradistinction to matter, there is form. And form comes from, its source is in the will of Hashem, the desire of Hashem, that was not revealed through speech or utterance, and therefore it shows up as bittul b'nivraim. Ayin sham ba'irach. We will all have to go study this mimer at great length, the Rebbe says. Okay? But that because it comes from such a place of bittul in its source, therefore it shows up and manifests as an inyan of bittul in creation, meaning to say it shows up as something unimportant, as effaced to the chaimer of what it's attached to. Like we often say, don't judge a book by its cover.
Can you please give an example, Rivky?
Yeah,
practical example.
Okay, so I my example was first, let's talk about a book and its cover, right? So you know, in publishing business, actually, there is a lot of, and I want to talk about that later, there is a lot of attentiveness to the cover because it's understood that the consumer's eye will be caught by a certain cover, or that the cover broadcasts something about the content of the book, or you want to position the book in a certain niche of the market, okay? But it's still true that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. It could be a very pedestrian, plain, drab cover and be the most exciting, mind-expanding, scintillating work. So the form shows up in a way of bittul towards the matter to which it's attached. And this is a physical manifestation of how it relates to its creation. Matter is at a remove from its creator. It was spoken into existence. And form is from the essence of Hashem's desire. Okay, now I know there were some messages. I'm going to open up the chat. Sarah is asking, I have such a question about the Tachash enjoying as many colors. According to Rashi, we can easily understand how human beings enjoy wearing something colorful by their behavior and appearance, by which signs we can tell the same about animals, or was it a unique feature for the Tachash? So I know nothing about animals, so I don't know, but maybe animal owners and lovers can speak more to this if you're able to. I know you could tell moods about animals from how they act, I believe, just by speaking to people who have dogs and cats. I don't know if this was unique to Tachash or is something that is true about others. Elisheva, I didn't write down what Kuf Hey Ayin stands for in the Gemara. I'm sorry. The Tachash's pride is real, not metaphoric. Does the Torah R line up with the three categories in the previous if, etzem, chilukim, and pratim? I don't see that the Rebbe makes that correlation. And what is the mimer called? So let's look at the footnote, the Torah R. It's Amiketz. Miketz, Seif Mem Aleph Gimel. Okay. Vav. No.
Rivky.
Yes, Esther, right?
Maybe,
Esther?
yeah, maybe it's like this. The example that you gave of the book is a very good example. The chaimer is the paper, is the ink, is the shape of the letters. Okay, anything physical that's there is the chaimer. The story is the form. You see, the story is abstract. It's the form of it.
So now you're explaining why it's a terrible example.
It's an excellent example.
No, I think a book is a terrible example because I don't think that the Rebbe is talking about physical and metaphysical. And thank you, Esther, for pointing out why it's not a good example. But maybe a cell phone is a good example. You have the mechanism, and then you have the form, the sleek outside form.
The form is its purpose. That's what form is.
No.
Chaimer, the spoon is the same metal, but the spoon makes it its purpose and the fork makes it its purpose. But it's the exact same matter. It's the exact same matter. It's the form the form is always not a physical thing. Chaimer and Tzura is always not the physical part. It is its purpose, its intent. The story is the intent, but you must have things in order to make it be. But the story is the will of it. The story is the will of the book. The chaimer is the ink, the form of the letters, the paper, whatever, the binding, whatever you want to call. The spoon is the metal, is the chaimer. The same thing is a knife. It's the exact same chaimer. The same thing is a hammer, maybe it has wood in it, but anything that's metal, used the same. It's the same chaimer. The purpose of it is the form. It's just everything like that in the world is like that. Everything has chaimer and surah. That's the way they created the world.
I think she's right, Rivky. No?
I agree with you. Okay, so let me ask you about the dogma that the Rebbe said in the sicha here about the rakia. Okay, maybe I misunderstood it, but it seemed to me that the Rebbe was saying that they should have created a rakia through saying there should be rakia, but that it should look blue, that it should look billowy with clouds. This comes from chayfetz. I'm not.
The purpose of the rakia comes from chayfetz. The purpose of the rakia, not the gashmius of the rakia. Or no. Even malachim are ruchnius. Malachim have chaimer. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a malach. Yes. And it's an abstract. It's not a concrete thing. So there's chaimer in everything. Nothing can be, even a word. The word is the chaimer. The purpose of what the word means is the tzura.
I think that what you're saying is all true. I'm just not convinced that it's how the Rebbe is using chaimer and tzura here. I think everything you're saying is true. I'm not sure. I preface by saying that this is something I really, really, really need to study a lot more. But it seems if we go on a little bit more, it looks like the Rebbe is saying that, because what did we start with? We started with the color on the hide skin, right? The colors, not the reason for the colors, not the meaning of the colors, not how you use the colors, just that there are colors.
So is the colors the tzura? Is that what we're saying here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So then where are we getting the idea that it's not physical? It seems like it definitely is.
That's why I'm saying
color is a reflection of light. Color is not a thing.
Okay, but if you use dye,
yes, dye is the thing, right. But the reflection, how the light hits it. But even if you say that the color is, even if you say the color is the tzur is the chaimer, right? It is the light that in the color that is the form. No. It's red is the way the light hits it, and the Eberster, whatever, forget it. We're going to get into stuff.
I think we should go forward in the sicha, if that's okay. I think we got it. We have people listening and we want to stick to our time. So if we could just keep going.
Esther, thank you. And I, for sure, for me, tzarech iyun gadol, not katan, chamor, not kal. But I think here, albeit you could say chaimer and tzura are physical and metaphysical, I think here the Rebbe is talking about all physical. He's talking about the material of the physicality and then the form of the physicality, I think. Okay, V'yesh Leimar, this is in the brackets at the bottom left of page 5. Shezeh bo lidei bitui bezeh shetzuras hanivram hu davar chitzoni she'ein boi teichen. And we might say that this comes to full expression in the fact that the form of a physical thing that's created is external to it, and it doesn't have teichen. Like you can't hold red in your hand. You can't hold blue in your hand. Shatama primi lazehu, lefisha betzuras hanivra nimshach inyan habitul, because the Rebbe is, again, explaining to us that in form, you're always going to find abnegation, effacement. V'lachein ba betzuras hanivra she'ein la mitzios v'teichen la'atzma. And therefore, it comes down into this world as something that doesn't have its own existence. It doesn't have its own teichen, mamashos. K'may ha'metzias shebe'etzem metzias hanivra. V'chein b'teichen hanivra g'darav. So, it's not here actually Tzippa, the Rebbe is referring to those two categories. He's saying that this third category of the particularities, for instance, the color, doesn't have mitzias like the first category, which is etzem mitzias hanivra, and the second category, which is the teichen hanivra gudarav. It's particular category. So yes, you were right. The Rebbe is connecting it to the three categories. And through this, we'll be able to understand more deeply the innermost understanding. Now we're in a position to understand on a much deeper level why this was the uppermost of all coverings on the Mishkan. Because this idea where you see in created matter, bittul, in creation, shazehu teichnei ha'ikri shel ha'mishkan, hashras hashchina ha'pa'eles bittul galui l'kadosh baruch hu. Galui l'kadosh baruch hu. This was the main idea of the Mishkan. Hashem resting, which would create total bittul to the manifestation of Hashem. And this is Shayach L'Tzuras Hanivram Yoser Milishar Chelkei Hanivra. And this is relevant to this third category, the Tzura, the details of the form, more than in any other aspect of creation. Ubitul zen nirmas ba'oris chashim dafka. And this is alluded to, Exhibit A, are the iris tchashim. Shagam tzivui shala'ar shehu rak davar chitzoni hu mimin achai. Because the color, which you're going to say is very external, but even the color comes from the category of chai, because it's a natural color. The adraba, and even more so, davar chitzoni zeh shayek letzem mehusa shalachai. And this external thing we see in this particular animal is relevant to its very essence. This is more important to the essence of this particular creature, this animal, than any other details. and this explains possibly why not other animals, because it takes pleasure in its externalities. It takes pleasure in the in its externalities, which showcases total abnegation to Hashem's presence. And that's why it is the uppermost covering on the Mishkan. Zion. Al pianal yesh levar gam kenatam shedover zeh batei bi'ariya she'al hamishkan dafka. Okay, now we understand why this had to be in the Mishkan, because of its lesson, what it showcases. But why does it have to be in the form of Yiriyos? Coverings on the Mishkan. So the Rebbe says, Ki hachilukim bechalkei hamishkan, kelim ukrashim v'yiriyos hamishkan, heim behetem legimel inyanim anal. This is where I should have been providing you with a chart that has various cells so you could correlate everything. I'm sorry that I just don't know how to do that. But the Rebbe says that in the Mishkan, there are three parts. There's kelim, there's krushim, and there's Urias. And they line up with the three categories that we spoke of earlier. And soon we're going to see, the Rebbe is going to tell us that they line up in our Avodas Hashem. Klei hamikdash shekol echad mehem chaluk mizulasei b'chol echad mehem ha'isa avodah acheres behetem l'tchunasei ha'prati shel hakli. So you have the kelim. Each one is different from the other. Each one was used for a different service, a different avodah that was in consonance with its particular features. Hine al yodam miskala ech shetchunoi v'gidroi ha'prati shel kol davar sheba'olam hu davar Hashem. V'chayusoi ha'prati ha'mahava m'chaya oisoi v'amidas mitziyosoi hu kafi shehu l'mayla. This showcases, this revealed how there is the specificities of its category, that everything in this world flows from, and including the particular chayos of this particular existence, is vivified and brought into life from the truth of existence the way it is above. Okay, it's a little bit different, it's a little bit confusing, because it's making the first category already categorized, as opposed to just being about, because it's going in the opposite direction. You'll soon see hakrashim shehei makifim es kol asher b'teichem b'shava. The boards or the planks of acacia wood that were overlaid with gold, called the krushim, of which the walls of the Mishkan were comprised. They encircle everything within them equally. And Moirim, they point to, or they teach about, Al Or Makif, the celestial light that encircles. Va'al Yadam Nifal V'niskala Zeh Shekol Nimtzaim Lo Nimtzu Elam Amitas Imatzai. And so this showcases that everything only exists from the truth of existence. She'inyan Zehu Davar Shav B'chol Nimtzaim Kulam. This is something that is found in all of creation, in all of existence. Shakol nimtzaim mitzura harishona ad yitush katan sheyia b'tabor aretz. That everything, from the first thing that existed in form till the tiny mosquito that's found deep in the earth, hakol mikoyach amitasei nimtzu. The Rambam says all of this is found from the truth of Hashem's existence. And then you have the Yeriyos, Hamakifim es kol asher ba'mishkan, ve'es hakrashim u'mayla, gam hei moirim al or makif. And then you have the Yeriyos that also point to the encircling light, aval al makif na'ale yoser, but on an even higher level of makif, shalachein hutzuchu liyos tzvuhim. That's why they had to be colored. And especially the uppermost level of the coverings that came from the skin, the height of a tachash, l'hayres to teach, the gam hatzir chitzoni shebedvarim sheba'ilam hu batal l'chai ha'ilamim. That even the most external aspect of the things in this world is abnegated to that which vivifies all the worlds, to Hashem, va'adarab, on the contrary, bitul zeh shel hatzirach hitzoni bab mimadrega nalis yoser. This level of self-abnegation comes from an even higher source, or makiv diktusha ratzon v'chefes Hashem shalamayla yoser. That comes from an even higher place. Then the Rebbe says in Ches, Gimel in Yanim Hanal Yeshem Gam Ba'avedis Ha'adam. We have the same three categories in the Avodas Hashem of each person. B'chol mitzvah yesh gimel in yanim. In every mitzvah, there are three aspects. There's ma'aseh ha-mitzvah. There's just doing the mitzvah. Shebazeh shavim kol echad v'achas miYisrael. Every man and woman is equal. Migadol shebigdolim ad katan shebiktanim. From the greatest to the smallest. Uludugma ma'aseh hanochas hatfilin shel Moshe Rabbeinu hu b'shabah l'ma'aseh hanochas hatfilin shel ish pashut b'chol hazmanim. Moshe Rabbeinu putting on tefillin is equal to every simple person putting on tefillin in all times. Uboloshan hatanya, like the Alter Rebbe says, Torah achas u'mishpat echad l'kulanu b'kiyum kol ha'torah mitzvot b'fchinas ha'maaseh. It's all one Torah. It's one thing for all of us when it comes to keeping Torah mitzvahs. Then there's kavanas ha'mitzvah. The second category is kavana. So this would correlate with the second, with the category of existence. Here you have differences between one and the other. And this is really dependent on the level of the person, on the work with their inner landscape, in their mind, in their heart. Midas havanasayis gdulas bayirchule. How, to what extent this person understands the greatness of Hashem. Hamivia la'abas Hashem v'yiras Hashem. This brings to Abbas Hashem and Yiras Hashem a b'lashon psak Rambam, like the Rambam paskins va'echi aderech la'avasi lirasei b'shah sheyizbainin chuli. How will you come? What is the path to loving Hashem and to being in awe of Hashem? It's through contemplation of Hashem. V'hein hanistaras Hashem elkeinu shal zeh isa b'zoyer shekol chad v'chad lefum shior delay. And this is also true about the secrets of Hashem, about which the Zohar says that each person can understand this according to their measure. And then there's Gimel, Hider Mitzvah. She'ena ma'akeh b'kiyum mitzvah. Then you have being punctilious with the mitzvah, beautifying the mitzvah. This is not ma'akev. You see, because there are certain things that could be ma'akev, even kavana. There's certain things that if you don't have the right kavana, then it could undermine the action. But this third category is hider. It's never going to undermine the action. Ad lehider b'fratim noisafim al guva mitzvah, including adding certain details to the actual body of the mitzvah. Ubifrat in yanim hatluim b'minhag, and especially things that have to do with minhag. One community does it like this. One community does it like that. And the Rebbe says about these things, a person might mistakenly think they might think that the most important things are, of course, ma'aseh ha-mitzvah and the kavana. That would be a very profound mistake. Of course, we know self-understood that you have to be very careful with doing the mitzvah. Because the doing is the main thing. Like the Alter Rebbe explains in elongated fashion, the Tanya, Dimkra kriya shema b'machshavtoi u'b'liboi levad b'chol koyach kavanasei lo yotza yedei chavasa v'tzarech lachzor v'likreis. If somebody just read Shema in their heart, in their mind, and they had tremendous amount of kavanah, they did not dispatch their obligation of Kriya Shema. On the other hand, if he said it, if he articulated with his lips, and he had no kavanah whatsoever, of it. After the fact, he fulfilled his obligation. So we understand that ma'aseh hu ha'ikar. We understand that category. It's non-negotiable. And we understand the importance of kavanah. Ki mitzvah b'li kavanah he could go b'lay neshama. Because a mitzvah without kavanah is like an inert body without a soul. Ukafi Sherech Ad Mazaki Betanya, like the Alter Rebbe says, at length in Tanya, it is Goydel HaHecher Bekima Mitzvahs Mitach Avas Hashem V'Yiras Hashem. Alter Rebbe explains those are the wings that make the mitzvah soar. Aval binyanim hanosafim ubefrat haminhagim ma'u adiyek bahem. But the person might say, but minhagim. Oh, look what Sippa did! Wow, thank you. I was trying.
I don't know if it's accurate. I just did it while you're teaching.
I can't. I'm trying to ignore it so we could get through the end of the sicha. But thank you. But you know what happened? Like, my mommy eye. I could see something was going on the side of the screen. Okay, but so the person understands. Everybody understands. You have to do the ma'aser. You have to have the kavana. But what's the big deal to get all carried away about the extras and specifically about the minhagim? And especially about minhagim that have to do with how to be mechanech small children. And you might think, these children are too young. They're not really registering exactly what they're seeing and what they're hearing. Umagam taf begil rach b'yoser, and how much more so tiny tots, infants, very, very young children. And here the Rebbe says, comes the hira, comes the lesson, that even the color, even the external shades, hu chelek mimin chaya, it's part of the category of what is living. Shadvarim kitzir chitzoni tzrichim le'asais mitoch chayus, that things that seem to be just external have to be done with chayus. The chayus haba me'etzem haneshama, and the chayus has to come from the essence of your soul. The kama minhage Yisrael she reisham lamaila yosem mikama. I'm sorry, Shersham. And we know that there are minhagim, there are many of minhagi Yisrael that their source is higher mikame in yonei dinim, from certain dinim. And if you look at footnote 45, the Rebbe says you should look at the Alter Rebbe's mimer about this in Sukkos, in Likutei Torah, where he talks about the minhag of hakafas and the minyan of nisuch hamayim as opposed to nisuch hayayin, etc. All of these are minhagim, vasikin, very ancient minhagim. Minhag Yisrael Torah, and famously we have this idea that minhag Yisrael is part of Torah, and we also have the idea of minhag mivatel halacha, that sometimes a minhag could even override halacha. And the Rebbe says there's a famous tshuva from Rashba, a very well-known tshuva, where he says in part the minhagim of older women, that some people might roll their eyes and say, oh, Baba Maises. He says, Yesoidai, its basis, Baharei Kodesh, is in holy mountains, metaphorically mountains. And through this, that each person adds in all of inyanim of Torah mitzvahs, hein kiyum Torah mitzvahs b'poel, ubehider mitzvahs, both in keeping the mitzvah b'poel and in beautifying it and in being careful, hanigleis lanu levanenu, that were revealed to us. And hein b'hanistoris Hashem Elokeinu, b'avodas Hashem, ba'avas Hashem, v'yiras Hashem, and also adds in that which is hidden away and is only known to Hashem, in our avodas Hashem, in our avas Hashem, in our yiras Hashem, the hein b'diuk b'minhagei Yisrael, all three categories. Through this, it happens that Hashem will rest amongst us, each and every one of us, man and woman. And this hastens and brings closer the building of the third Beis Hamikdash, which is Machain l'shiftecha pa'alta Hashem. It is, those are words from the Torah, that this is a place for you to rest. You created Hashem. Shemikdash shalamata mechuvan keneged Beis Hamikdash shalamayla. The Beis Hamikdash in this world is mechuvan, kind of parallels the Mikdash Shalamayla, the celestial Beis HaMikdash, and this should all be b'mheira v'yameinu mamash, speedily in our days. I personally don't have a lot of time, but I have to bounce, even though there's so much to unpack.